Hello, everyone. I'm Amy Davies. I am the CEO of First 30, and today I am joined by Kerry O'Brien. Kerry, why don't you tell everyone a little more about who you are and what you do?
Happy to. So I'm Kerry O'Brien. I am the talent development lead at a software company called Axonify. We're headquartered in Waterloo, but we have folks all over the world. And I do talent development and everything that entails. So that's a lot of L&D, learning and development, a little bit of event planning, a little bit of culture, just kind of whatever they need me to do. That's what I'm there to do.
And don't forget that you're a great speaker. So I don't want to embarrass you, but I went to see you at Disrupt HR in Kitchener-Waterloo. And your talk was so memorable. And I loved how you used humor in a really, I thought, effective way to make your point. And you got the audience so excited. And I think that everyone shared the sentiment that you did a really great job with that talk.
Well, that's really kind. Thanks. And there were a lot of great speakers. If listeners, watchers have a chance to go back and watch some of those Disrupt HR talks, there were some really good speakers that night.
Yeah, I agree with you. There was, and that's definitely an event I'm putting in the calendar for every year going forward. If it's that good, I definitely want to be there.
100%.
So you have a great idea for our HR network, and I'd love to hear what your big idea is.
Okay, let me give you the pitch here.
Okay.
So I'm meeting more and more HR business partners at smaller or mid-sized firms that find learning development as part of their portfolio. Here's the thing. A lot of folks are not trained in learning and development, but they're getting these portfolios because there's no one else to do them. There's not enough scale to hire someone like me who's trained and experienced to do it. And so I thought, what if we could I didn't want to call it learning and development for dummies because that's too reductive. But what if we were to do something like that so that people could at least get on their way to creating helpful, impactful learning and development programs without having to have a ton of experience or craft expertise?
Yes.
So here's what I want to pitch today, Amy.
Yeah.
Learning and development at its core, at its very most basic form, is about three things: knowledge retention, skill development, and behavior change.
Yeah.
That's what you're going for. Knowledge retention. Do I know a thing? Skill development. Can I do a thing? And behavior change. Am I consistently doing the thing? Mm-hmm. And when we think about learning and development through those sort of three lenses, what we do is we define where we need to spend our time and energy and what kind of assets we need to create or farm out. Are you with me so far? Does that seem sensible?
And I've never heard it put this way. And you bring up such a good point. This falls into so many HR departments' responsibilities, right? And then there's very few people who really have spent a lot of time putting together these types of programs.
For sure. And it is a craft in and of itself. I mean, I have a BEd in adult education. That's sort of like my formal learning. But before I had that, I was working in the craft for a couple of years. And I had gotten to a point where I knew what I was doing, but I didn't know why I was doing it. And if I had had these foundations, yeah. I think my learners did okay. I think they would have done a lot better if I had understood at least these basic things.
And one of the things, another thing you bring up that's so important is this idea about, well, it's not an idea. I mean, we all know we've got bad memories. Let's face it. How do we make the learning stick? So what are some of your recommendations there about how we make it stick?
For sure. And I think having those three categories in mind, because when we talk about learning sticking,
yeah,
are we do we mean they remember it? Do we mean they're actioning it? Do we mean they're behaving differently than they did beforehand? It can actually mean different things. And so the first step is always define your goals. Every program I create, Amy, starts with one simple statement. After this program, the learner will, and then I have bullet points. The learner will understand this. The learner will recall that. The learner will perform this. The learner will whatever it is. And then based on those goals, I kind of bucket out those goals into my three buckets. Okay, this goal is about knowledge acquisition. They're going to know this thing, or, very important distinction, they're going to know where to find it. We can't expect everybody to know everything and remember everything, especially if it's not information they're going to be accessing every day. So we need to know whether they need to know it or whether they need to know where to find it. Second bucket, skills. What are they going to do differently in order to have be considered to complete the program? If I'm, for example, doing a program that's all about, let's say I'm pitching a product. That's what this learning program is all about. I need to be able to describe our platform really, really well. Then the skill is explaining the platform. And then behavior change, are they doing it consistently? And most learning goals don't fall into a behavior change. That's more of a metric, but it is helpful to keep in the back of your mind for how am I going to know that people have actually done this thing? So the first step to making it stick is knowing what's expected of the learner. The second step is actually building out that program. And if you look and you see, oh, I've got a ton of knowledge acquisition here, maybe you need to consider zooming out a little bit and saying, okay, they don't need to know all these things. They just need to know where to find them. So I need to build out a really simple and elegant document database or something they can access. And that actually takes a lot of pressure off, because now I don't have to teach them every little thing. I just have to teach them the important pieces and be like, by the way, this reference, this is where you need to go afterwards.
And that's really,
so go ahead.
It's a great way to help people and help the teachers, because the teachers don't want to have to continually be reminding. And I think we lose a little faith in what we've learned when we always have to go back to somebody else and say, hey, where was that file again?
One of a nightmare program that I was once part of, we were implementing a new tool, and we had to, I don't know why the decision was made. I came in halfway through the project, but it was decided that we were going to get everybody to just use the tool and do 8 hours of virtual training for everybody. And there was zero retention because our documentation just wasn't there, because people couldn't get into it. They would do one thing, then they do the next thing and forget the first thing. And it was a mess. So really, really being realistic about, I want people to know these things. Like, these are the core things they absolutely have to know and be able to like recall immediately. And then I need them to know where to find these other things, so that I am not the bottleneck. I'm not the person they have to come back to. You know, if I win the lottery and leave the company tomorrow, there's absolutely no knowledge lost there as far as my learners are concerned.
Right.
So that's the first thing to make it stick. When we talk about knowledge acquisition, just define what they need to know, define what they need to find, and then put it at a place they can find it. When we talk about skill development, the key to any skill, and I'm sure this won't surprise you, Amy, is practice. People need a chance to practice. So again, the first thing you need to decide is this a skill they're going to be using consistently? And if it is, then give them practice in the moment, supervised with feedback and encouragement, because we as humans need encouragement. We are engines that run on praise. And then they can go off and do the thing, and as they practice and iterate, they'll get better. If this is a skill they're only going to need every so often, what you might have to do is consider refresher training, refresher courses, refresher opportunities to practice. But either way, whether it's all the time, some of the time, or rarely, if this is a skill they need opportunities to practice the skill, first in a safe to fail environment, and then just as refreshers go forward. And that's our skill development piece of making sure that training sticks. The last thing we need to do, does that make sense from a skill development piece? You got me preaching here.
I just love your reference to the safe to fail environment. That's wonderful.
It's super important, because humans do not like to be bad at things. We don't like to, we don't. And adult humans are the worst for that, especially if we're good at other things. We don't remember what it's like when you start a new job or something. You're like that. I was talking to a colleague whose partner started a new job, and they'd been at their old job for a few years today. And I asked, well, how's it going for him? And they said, oh my goodness, he hates it. He said, I hate being new. It's just the worst feeling in the world. I don't know anything. No one knows who I am. I can't do anything. We hate that feeling. And so having practice in a safe to fail environment where we can sort of get our reps in, start feeling good about it, makes us more likely to use the skill in the real world when the opportunity presents itself. I hope I don't need to tell any HR professional that people will find very creative ways to avoid doing things they do not wish to do. So if you don't give them the opportunity to do it in a way that feels good for them, they're going to find ways not to do it. That's why practice is so important.
Yeah. Yeah, but my whole world is employee onboarding, so I know exactly what
There
you're
you go.
talking about.
Preaching to the
Yeah,
choir here.
yeah.
So the very last thing, like I said before, the behavior change is less so much a design strategy and more of a metric. So the question you're really asking yourself when you're filling out your behavior change bucket is, how will I know that this program, whatever it looks like, was effective 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road, a year down the road? And there's a few different ways that you can figure this out. Ideally, everything would be like sales. Sales is my favorite to design for as far as metrics go, because either people are selling or they're not selling.
Yeah.
But it becomes a little bit more difficult when you talk about things like customer satisfaction. Like how can you point to a customer satisfaction score and say like 15% of that score is because of my training? It's really difficult to do. So you have to find ways. A really common way is just going to the people themselves and saying like, hey, over the last 6 months, since you've had training X, how do you feel about your ability to perform this thing? Low confidence, middle confidence, high confidence. How do you feel about moving into a scenario like this? Low confidence, middle confidence, high confidence. You can also engage leadership and say, hey, these 5 people on your team have taken this training. Well, actually, probably don't say that, but you've got 5 people who have taken the training, 5 who haven't. For these 5 people, how confident do you feel about them doing this thing? Yeah. And then you can take those things and also look at like a customer satisfaction score or some metric that, your training would affect, but would only be a component of. Mm-hmm. And you can build a reasonable picture to say like, yes, this was effective. No, this was not effective. Yes, effective, but better if. Yeah. So really, when we're talking about behavior change, we're talking about the long-term impact of this program and figuring out how to make it better next time.
Yeah. This is amazing insight, and and I'm thinking everyone listening to this is going to definitely want to know where they can find out more. And I know you have probably a more than full-time job, but is there anywhere that you would, so you don't want, as I'm sure you love people reaching out to you, but is there anywhere,
I do actually.
Is there anywhere that people can learn more about what you're discussing today?
Of course, I am a total nerd for this kind of stuff. So please, if you ever want to like strike up a conversation on LinkedIn, and that's my own, I don't have a website yet. I don't have any of that stuff. Just find me on LinkedIn. It's easy. You can always strike up a conversation with me. I love this kind of stuff. 2 books I would recommend very, very much so, in fact, for this type of learning. The first one is Map It by Kathy Moore. Okay. It's one of the yellow books behind me on the shelf here. And it is a really in-depth, it's thick, but it's good, about how to take a learning design from conception to delivery, all the while managing stakeholders along the way. And that, I think, is an underrated skill when it comes to learning design in corporations, is not only how do you design the best program, but how do you get stakeholders on side for it? Because let's be honest, not everybody is a learning expert, but everybody's done a little bit of learning. So they all think that they have more expertise than they probably do.
And I always say it's easier to be a critic than a creator. So
it's true, but in the corporate world we live in, it's important to get people on side.
For sure.
So Map It is a great resource, especially if you're not feeling particularly confident in your learning design skills and you want to know, like, what questions should I ask my stakeholders at what stage? Map It is a great resource. The other one I would recommend is Make It Stick. It's by 3 authors, Brown, Boediger, and McDaniel. And that is it is a book that is geared primarily towards corporate learning designers. So it's about adult education in the workplace. And it is, I would say it's non-traditional in its approach, in that it kind of dispenses with a lot of the frameworks we've put in place over the last 50 years of workplace learning. And it just says, how can we make this stuff stick with people? How can we make this stuff reside in their brains the way we need it to? So going back to some of the conversation we just had around making hard choices about what people need to know and what people need to be able to find, Make It Stick has a really good way, some really good frameworks to help you make those decisions. So that would be my recommendation as well.
Those are, well, I feel my reading list growing already.
And when you read them, come back and talk to me about them.
Oh,
because
I
they're
believe
really
me,
good
I'll
books.
be talking to you. Now you said that is the best way to find you then on LinkedIn. People want to connect.
Yes, 100%. I am not. I'm not one of those consultants that has like a website and an Instagram. I don't have a. I certainly don't have a that talent development TikTok or anything like that.
Oh, I
Just
know.
LinkedIn. I
Yeah.
search for Kerry O'Brien, KerryObrien. I'm the one with the beard.
Yes. Yeah. You're in our network. You're going to be easy to find because you have some really great connections and you do a good job of updating your LinkedIn as well. So whatever any of those other social media sites are missing, it's working well on LinkedIn.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, thank you very, very much for joining us today. I learned a ton. So I'm really excited for everyone
Awesome.
else to be able to benefit from your wisdom. Thank you, Kerry.
Thanks for having me, Amy.
Bye-bye.
Bye.